Has this ever happened to you? I'm just saying, if humans came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? You can't have an atmosphere next to a vacuum. The Big Bang violates the second law of thermodynamics. The good news is, there is help. I've written a book, Rational Answers to Stupid Questions. This will be your handbook for dealing with nonsense. The book will be coming out this holiday season, and you can purchase it on BookBaby. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you soon.
True. What about some of the other things within the Bible, like genocide, slavery, stuff like that?
I don't condemn that.
You don't?
No,
You don't condemn slavery or genocide?
no.
That's strange. You
Not
discriminately
condemn.
killing a group of people just because of
Well,
their position as a people would be kind of frowned upon.
no, in the Bible, right? So when it was
Yeah,
done in the Bible, I don't condemn when it was done in the Bible.
yeah. So like the
Jesus.
children's and the infants of the Amalekites,
No,
the innocents of those groups,
no.
just because they happen to be Amalekites.
Well, the Amalekites, yeah, they went against God. They sinned for like 400 years,
What
and
about
then God
what about the
passed the judgment
children,
on
the
them.
infants,
Okay,
the
John.
cattle?
Yeah,
John,
yeah.
I got an important question for you.
So you're talking about 1 Samuel 15:3, right?
Perhaps. So before we do this, John, I have a question. Does it make any logical or moral sense to you to punish somebody for a crime they didn't commit?
Yeah, death isn't always a punishment, right? From a Christian perspective, death is just the beginning.
What if
Okay, so you're
in
fine with
ancient
killing people indiscriminately.
No,
so what
if God is the author of life and he chooses to take away life, that's his means to do so. So if he takes
so
away
if
your
Says
it
life
who?
and he brings you into
Says
heaven,
who?
well, it'd be God, because if he is the author of life, right? So we're presupposing that he is the author of life here. If he's not the author of life, then he doesn't have the right to do so.
so if an
What gives
ancient
the author of
Egyptian
life the
pharaoh
right to
took
do that?
you and like buried you in a tomb next to the sarcophagus of a mummified pharaoh just because he wanted to have servants in the afterlife, would that be a
If,
punishment to you? Would
if,
that be a
if
kind thing to
yeah,
you?
so here's the thing. If their belief is true and then their gods are the author of life, then they could do that. They would have the means to do that.
How are we supposed to know that?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, you guys wouldn't know that. So I'm
Neither
just
do you.
presupposing that if it is true, he does have the right to do so. If it isn't true, then he doesn't.
So, John, why don't I just invent a religion that says kill all Christians because that's what my God wants me to do? You would have no way of saying that this is wrong. You'd have to basically take the position, well, let's wait until we're all dead and see what happens.
Well, if there is no God at all, and you did do that, then there's no basis to say that's wrong at all.
No, I said, what? That's not what I said.
No, I know it's not what you said. What I'm saying is, look, if you invent a religion and there's no God in the first place, and then you say, I have this religion where we say we can kill a bunch of people just because, like Christians or whatever, by definition, I can't say that's wrong because it's just my subjective morality versus yours.
You're using your own subjective morality right now.
Yeah, I believe in objective morality.
No, you
So
don't.
Now
you
you can
believe
you can
that
you
good
can argue
exists
you can
outside of the mind of God?
what's that?
You believe that good exists outside of the mind of God.
No, good is an aspect of who God is.
Then it's subjective to that God.
No, subjective would be that if God is choosing, like he's saying, I want this to be good and I want this to be bad. It's just an aspect of his nature. He's not choosing what is
Then
good.
if it's an aspect of his nature, it's outside the God, which means the
It's
God
not
isn't
outside.
Yeah,
required for
God is
good.
defined as a being that one of his attributes is goodness or good
So
morals, which
God
means
doesn't
Yeah,
God doesn't have attributes.
so Big John,
Hold on, pause, pause, pause. Hold
when
on.
we
We
say
need
that
to
the
we
nature
got to
of
correct.
God is good, that's a defining factor of his nature. It doesn't mean that that good comes from his nature. It's a defining factor of his nature, which means good is external to that God, meaning that God is not required for good. So I can
So again,
definitely
God,
have the exact
so
same good as an atheist.
God doesn't have attributes. He transcends attributes because he's immaterial, right? Saying something is outside of infinite doesn't
He
make any
has
sense.
no attributes.
That's correct.
That makes no sense. Everything that exists has attributes.
He transcends attributes. He's above attributes. Because if he
Then he
had
doesn't exist.
attributes, he'd be part of the material. Therefore, he'd be motion and movement, which doesn't work. You can't have something.
Then he doesn't
you're
exist.
describing something that doesn't exist.
I'm describing something that's immaterial.
No,
Yeah,
even
something that doesn't
immaterial
exist
things would have
and has no
attributes. In fact,
qualities.
So can,
being immaterial
being,
would be an attribute of that thing.
being immaterial isn't an attribute. It's a lack of attribute.
No, it is an attribute. It absolutely is. Anything that defines something
Okay.
is an attribute. Anything.
Okay, prove to me something can't be immaterial.
I don't have to.
Okay, so then I'm not convinced.
You have a burden of proof. What convinces you that your claim makes any sense?
Well, because simply looking at things like the Kalam cosmological argument and then looking at the problem with infinite regression.
Oh God.
Kalam cosmological assumes that everything came into existence, or
No, that's
and
why
we
Which we
can't
have
show
no
that to, we
evidence
can't show
of.
that to be the truth.
so
And the
you took
infinite
half.
regression issue is removed as soon as you look at time as not being linear. If you have a model of time that's non-linear,
Yeah,
infinite regression
But
is not
we
an
also know
issue.
that time is just a property of space. A universe can exist in which there is no space time.
so I have no reason to believe in B theory of time.
What? The theory of
That,
time?
that's
The
fine.
B theory, right? So he just brought up B theory of time,
You,
which
you
is
can
just
have non-linear time within A theory of time. All that A theory of time posits is that time is a progression. That's all it posits.
right.
It can be a circular progression of time and still fall within A theory of time.
Before we start talking about the Big Bang, is it okay if I loop backwards for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can God do anything immoral?
No,
So God is defined as a being who must obey morality.
no. He can't go anything against his nature, right? Just like you
So he's
can't
not all
go.
powerful.
So just like, well, it depends on how you define all powerful.
Can do
Like God can,
anything.
yeah. So I wouldn't say, if you're saying anything, then I'd say no, God is not all powerful because he can't.
God is shackled by morality, which means it doesn't come from him. He must obey it.
Which is like he's shackled by the laws of logic,
Okay?
right? Like
So
God
they
can't.
don't come from him then.
They're
Either
an
of those things.
they're an aspect of him,
Yeah, they don't
right? So
come from him.
so what you're stating here is if you have something that is the highest, right? You have the laws of logic, you have morality. These things come from God. They're an aspect of him because nothing can go above him. If you're saying that God is shackled by them, then it's by above him. So by definition, those things would be God. So morality in itself would be God. Logic in itself would be God.
That made no sense.
Why not? What was missing?
That I have a cat that is annoying me right now.
So basically, what you're
God is not
saying,
producing these things; He's bound by them.
yes,
It's an aspect of
you're
who he
saying
is.
that they
Hold on, I
come
gotta take my
from
sweater off.
him, yet they also define what he is. It can't be both. It's either the definition of him or they come from him, not both, right?
It is an aspect of who.
We don't call something good because good comes from it. We call something good because it is good. The concept of good is outside the thing.
So then that would suggest that good would transcend God, so therefore good would be God.
Yeah, so it's either good is outside God or
hmm
good comes from God, and then it's subjective to that God.
So God, why can't good come from God and not be subjective to him just changing it?
Because it would not exist if that God did not exist.
Why not? You're just saying it. Explain it.
It's one or the other. It's either it exists independently or it would not exist without the God. It's one or the other. It's a true dichotomy.
You're stating it like it's a contradiction, but I don't see the contradiction.
It's a true dichotomy. It's
Mhm.
either from the God and dependent on that God, and if that God didn't exist, it would vanish, or it exists external to that God, and that God is not required for it to exist. One or the other.
Yeah, so it is option A, but that doesn't mean that God can just change
Then
it.
it's subjective to that God
Why?
because it would not exist without that God.
Yeah, so if you're stating subjective as in it cannot exist without that God, I agree with you, but that doesn't necessarily God can just whim it and change it because it's an aspect of his nature. Can you
What is it
change an
that makes
aspect of
this
your
God
nature?
objective?
What do you mean objective?
This is what you believe. If God says something, like gives a moral command, then it's objectively good because it comes from God.
Because he is the sum of all.
That doesn't mean anything.
It does mean something. If you're the
Hey,
sum of all, it
Big
means
Big
there's
John,
no
That
improvement.
no,
Big
it
John.
it really
Let, let
doesn't.
me let me ask you this question: if you say somebody is immoral, would you say there's room for improvement?
If somebody's immoral, is there room for improvement?
Yes.
I suppose so. Could we
If there is
improve
no,
upon God? Well, is killing every single person, including unborn infants inside of mothers' wombs during a flood, could
yeah.
we
So
improve upon that? Sounds like we
that
could.
that's a goalpost shift, right? We're just
So
talking about
What?
the nature of
No,
hey
God
it
right
hey
now.
isn't.
hey
Yeah,
John.
it is. I'll explain how it's a goalpost shift. So right now we're just talking about the philosophy of God. You switch from the philosophy of God to seeing that if that's the Christian God. Those are two different subjects.
Well, you're
That's the
describing the
God we're talking
philosophy of
about.
God as
Do,
a
do
Christian
you
God.
do you think that it's impossible to improve upon the Bible?
No, I think you can improve on the Bible. I
So
don't
then
think
the
the Bible.
Bible is not perfectly moral.
I don't. Well, I went. No, okay. When you're saying improve, like, is there error in the Bible? Yes, there's error in the
Jesus
Bible.
Christ.
I just want to understand what you're saying before I make an answer, man. Just chill.
This is the thing you said. You said, would somebody, if somebody's not perfectly moral, or if somebody, well, actually, you said if somebody's immoral, do you think we could improve upon them? Yes. You think the
Yeah.
Bible can be improved upon. That means it's immoral. Doesn't mean it's
So
the most immoral thing imaginable. Just means it's not perfect because it can be improved upon, apparently. But now
no, okay.
now
So
you
if
shifted the goalpost and said, well,
well,
what do you
I
mean
hadn't
by
even.
improved upon?
See, the thing is, I hadn't even landed my plane when I was talking about the morality and improvement, and then we kind of jumped into another subject. So I had like a whole another half point I was going to get into. The Bible has errors. There's mistakes in it. There's copy erased errors. There's issues, and it's talking about the morality that comes from God. No, there's no issue in there. But when you're talking about like
Why
Numbers
not?
31, when you're talking about like Numbers 31, what Moses did, yeah, that was wrong and that was sinful, and nobody should take that as something that they should live their life by.
Cool.
So if you're saying, is there immoral things in the Bible that we shouldn't do? The answer is yes.
Do you think that flooding the entire world and killing everybody, including unborn babies, is immoral?
No, not when God did it.
Why?
Because what God says, he says, I take the righteous from this world, don't mourn them because I'm taking them from the evil that they would have
So
endured.
it's okay when God does it because God says it's okay when God does it.
Because God's the
That does
author of
not
life.
sound objective.
Because God is the author of life, similar to the fact that I
That's a
can't go
claim.
outside. Right. So it's a
So
presupposition
you're
that we
saying
can
might
argue.
makes right?
So hold on. The thing is, right now we're arguing like three different points. So are we going on the presupposition that God is the author of life and that he's actually God? Because if we're going to argue that
What would give him the right to kill unborn babies if that was the case? You must be
because he
pro-life or
because he
pro-choice, actually.
because he'd be the author of life.
Okay, if
So you say
if my
might
wife and
makes
I
right.
conceive, we're the author of that life. We have the right to terminate then.
You're not the author of that life.
Yeah, we
You
are. We
conceived that
created it.
life.
Sperm, meat, egg.
Yeah. So you participated in the creating. You didn't create it yourself.
Yes, we did. It's my sperm. This
No,
was
it belongs
not
to God.
a virgin
So what I
conception.
mean what I mean by author of life, I don't mean somebody that like
We don't
conceives
mean
of.
somebody creating life. So you don't
No.
actually mean anything at all.
Well, no. Well, see, here's the issue: is I keep trying to explain what I'm saying, and then you stop me halfway through my sentence and you say, "Well, that's not what you mean,"
Because you don't
right?
actually have a position.
I do have a position, but
You say things, and then when
to
you apply
actually
these
get
things in other scenarios, you say, no, that's different.
to actually get my position across, I have to reach the end of my sentence. That's the hard part.
There was, I did not cut you off when I asked that question,
So
actually.
the
So
author of life says that God sustains all life as it is. The reason that you breathe and you exist is because God is sustaining you. That's what author of life means, not the fact that he conceived you.
that's a silly claim.
Right. So you could
Nothing
say
about
that's
life is
wrong, but that
miraculous.
sure you could say that's wrong, but then that's a different argument. So this is what I mean by you're arguing two or three different things at
Well,
once.
it gets rid of one of your premises
What's one of my premises?
that God is the author of life.
What do you mean? What? How
What
does it
do
get
I
rid of my
mean?
premises?
It's your premise. Nothing about life is miraculous. So on what grounds is that premise substantiated?
What?
Okay, so here's what you said. my wife and I hypothetically conceive a child. Well, but you're not the author of life because God is what makes it possible for you to be alive. No, we know a
That's not
great
what I
deal
said.
about the chemistry of life, and literally nothing
That's
about
not what
what
I
makes
said.
living organisms exist is miraculous.
That's not what I said. I said
Yes,
Gother.
it
I
is.
said God sustains life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Allows life to exist, sustains life.
Okay, sure. Okay, then yeah, I
Yeah.
misheard you.
And that there's nothing, if you can substantiate that claim, we can start from there. Because
Yeah, so
if you're gonna just give
that's
false premises, anybody can make an argument based on false premises, a deductive argument that guarantees a conclusion.
right. So that's what I was kind of going at. Like, what are we arguing about? Because now we have to go back to the Kalam
You're
cosmology.
arguing that
Correct.
God sustains life currently. He's the author of life because he
Yes.
sustains it. I
Okay.
think you have nothing to back that up.
So let me explain why we're having an issue having a conversation right now. We started the conversation going on, does God exist? So we dove into that. And then when we were doving into
No,
that,
we
we went into
didn't.
then we went into the attributes. And then going through the attributes, you're like, well, here's the immoral problems with God. And so then we went into why God could do these moral things. And then it led us all the way back to, does God actually exist? So we need to focus on a specific
I'm
topic.
not arguing whether or not God exists.
So
I
you
never
need
did.
God
Neither
exists.
did Matt.
You said I need
We're
to
just saying I don't get how you are claiming that God is the source of, we've had the universe, we've had morality, and now we're talking about life. I'd like to just stick on life because this is an important part of your argument.
Yeah,
So you say God sustains life. What reason could you possibly have to make that argument?
because he's the sum of all.
That's not,
Hey,
John.
John.
Spanky is the author of life because he is the supreme overlord and the author of all.
Hey,
Prove me
John,
wrong.
and
You
by
could
the way, the
Prove me
Trinity
wrong.
would not be the sum of all. It cannot be within like Christian theology for the that God be the sum of all, because the greatest punishment is to be separate from that God. He cannot be part of all if you
Yeah,
can be
yeah.
separate from him.
I don't
So
hold to
he is not
theology.
the sum of all.
So Matthew,
He
you
is
should ask
only
me
the
what
sum of what he wants to be part of, and he
Matthew,
is
Matthew,
separate from the rest.
Matthew. You should ask me what I believe about Christian theology before you tell me I'm wrong in it, right? So
I
I
didn't
don't.
say what you said about Christian theology. I said what is said within Christian theology.
You're telling me what is said in fundamental Christian theology.
No, that's said in most Christian theology,
Okay, show me a
not
church
just
father.
fundamental Christian theology.
Okay,
Most Christian theology
okay,
states
okay.
that
I'll
to
concede.
be in hell
Matthew,
is
Matthew,
to be separate from
Matthew,
God.
stop steamrolling. I'll concede if you show me a church father that says that.
I could walk down the street and walk into six different churches and show you
So
six different church
That's an
fathers that
argument
say
from
it,
authority,
but
John.
that doesn't matter.
fundamental
It
Christianity.
doesn't matter. Having a
It does matter.
position where you can be separate from God, which
I
is
don't
what
believe you could be
Christians
separate from
say,
God.
Do you believe in
which
hell?
is what Christians say, means you can't have a God that is the sum of all.
Right. I don't believe you can actually be separate from God. When we're talking about separate from God, we're talking about being separate from participating in his goodness.
What is
You're not
hell in
actually
your view?
separate from what I just said, separate from participating in his goodness.
Where is that held up within any scripture?
It's held up in the fact that it says that all the church fathers said that through all of church history.
No, I said in scripture.
That's
Yeah, I don't hold to sola scriptura
Why would you hold to that at all?
because I don't hold to sola scriptura. So you have a preconceived notion.
You're holding to people who
Okay,
did get
okay.
information from
So
scripture
Matthew,
and made assumptions.
I need to explain to you something about church history because you don't have any clue
You
about it.
don't need to explain anything about
I do.
Christianity to me. I was a Christian
Did.
for a long time,
So you were a
so
fundamental.
don't
I'm going.
attempt
I'm
to
going to.
persuade me
I'm
or
going to
teach me
attempt
or
to.
educate
I'm
me.
going to attempt to because you don't understand.
No, you're
Currently,
not.
currently in the world.
You're not going to treat me like a
Current-
child.
Well, if you stop acting like a child, I can stop treating you like one.
Stop trying to treat me like a child.
In the world,
Hey,
right?
Big John,
Fundamental Christianity.
I'm an adult, John. I
Fundamental
was a Christian
Christianity.
for 30 years, John.
You were
You're not going
fundamental.
to teach me anything about Christianity, John.
Okay, what are the church fathers?
You're not going to teach me anything about Christianity, John.
Okay, teach me about the church fathers.
Do you disagree that in Christianity people call hell a separation from God?
Tell me about the church fathers.
Yes or no, John?
Who are the church fathers?
Yes or no, John?
Who are the church fathers?
Yes
Okay,
or no,
so
John?
John, you're obviously not going to engage with the argument, and
So,
that's fine.
so the thing
But
is,
I
I
actually, what I
can I
said I
finish my
wanted to talk about was this claim that God sustains life.
can I finish my sentence?
You can just make your point, and then we're going to move on and talk about
Okay,
that.
so yeah, that's fine. So my point is, fundamental Christianity is a small percentage of what is Christians, right? There's 2 something billion Christians in the world. The majority of those Christians are Catholic and Orthodox.
Ad
The
populum fallacy. I
minority.
don't really care.
Were you saying teaching you about something about Christianity, right? So the aspects of Christianity, what is taught is sola scriptura is the minority
You're
view.
not teaching me anything. All you're doing is running your mouth and not actually participating in the conversation. Peterson
I,
asked you a
I
question.
answered,
Can you actually participate in the conversation
I,
instead?
I promise you all my life, I'm actually answering your question.
No, you're not. You're trying to belittle my position and try to show, oh, Matt doesn't know what he's talking about. How
Okay,
about
Matt,
you instead focus on what Peterson
I
just said,
admit you know,
right?
I
This is a
admit you know about
Right?
disaster.
fundamental
You
Christianity.
should listen to
Can
Peterson
I answer your
instead,
question?
maybe,
Can I answer
perhaps.
your question?
No, I didn't ask you a question.
You asked me the
You can't
question.
an- you
You
can't
asked me the
answer my
question about
question
the
if I don't ask
separation
you a
from God.
question.
You
I
asked me the
asked you a
question.
yes or no question.
But the problem with the yes or no question is it's more nuanced than that. That's why I'm
Nope,
trying
it's
to.
not. It's not. My question was, do many Christians say that going to hell is a separation from God? That's a
There are
yes or no.
Christians that say that, yes.
Okay, cool. That's the end of it
Okay,
then. Bye.
that's it.
Done.
Maybe, and like
Can those
John, you're going to
Christians
tell us
be
that
wrong?
the official like Catholics don't believe blah blah blah. If that's what the official Catholic doctrine is or whatever, or if that's your interpretation of the official Catholic and Orthodox doctrine or whatever, that may be the case, but that doesn't mean that all people that are even members of your church think the same things. I
I
know
agree.
Catholics that are young earth creationists, and I know Catholics that are not,
Yeah, I agree
right?
with that.
There are Catholics that hate the Pope. They think he's a communist, right? And there are
I also
Catholics
agree with
that
that.
don't, right? So like you can like I will take your point that it's not what the doctrine is, but that's what Matt was trying to say is this is what people actually believe.
Sure. Yeah, I don't. Right. So to
Okay,
have the
that's
conversation.
fine.
But the problem is you guys started the conversation is that it doesn't work in Christian theology. And I was trying to show you that's not the only idea in Christian theology. And I don't hold to that Christian theology.
What I don't know what you mean. We said doesn't work.
That you can be completely separated from God. I don't believe that
Oh,
is
right, that. Okay.
right. So
So
that's
yeah,
Well,
the
I mean,
that's
some
just
Christians do think
inconsistencies
that.
then.
You're not
well,
one of
some
them.
Christians think that.
So we're not arguing against you on that point. But it's true that there are Christians that say that,
Yeah, I agree
right?
with you.
So if
Yeah.
you're not one of them, then cool. So, anyways, God sustains life.
Yes.
What about that? Why should I think that?
Okay, so the reason that God sustains life is because he's the beginning of all things. Right? He's the one that creates it. He's the immaterial that created the material.
So I wouldn't say that that's evidence or really even an argument. It's just a claim.
That is just the claim, right? So we can get into the argument.
What if I simply accept your claim? What about that claim
Yeah,
gives
but I can
that
believe that.
being a
Yeah, I can
right
believe
to
that
take life away?
this is the
Just
same
because he has
thing.
the power to do so, does that make it right for him to do so?
No, because he
Right?
sustains it.
Yeah, yeah. I'll concede that he
Okay.
sustains life. Life
Yeah.
exists because he exists. I can concede that just
Yeah.
fine. It doesn't bother me. What gives him the authority to remove it from somebody for his liking because he wants to, because he chooses to do so,
Because he
right?
can.
A parent brings a child into the world.
Yeah.
That parent does not have the right to take that child out of the world. A God brings all existence into existence, what gives that God the right to take things out of that existence after already putting it there? Is it a
Okay.
might makes right scenario?
No, it's not Mike Wright's right. It's because the parent doesn't sustain the life of that child.
That's irrelevant to me.
How do they not sustain the life of the child?
So what I mean by
The child
sustain,
can't live independent of the
yeah, yeah,
mother.
you're right about that. So what I mean by sustain the life, I mean sustain existence in general. When I'm talking about life, I'm talking about I think, therefore I am. Like their entire existence is the
That's not
fact that
a
God.
that's not even a claim that has anything to do with life.
That still doesn't give like a justification to remove that existence. Just
Why
because
doesn't it?
they're the reasoning for that existence doesn't mean they have the right to remove that existence. Because we have autonomy. We are not like slaves. We are not possessions. We are not just toys. We are ourselves. We are individuals. We are people. We have
Okay, so
souls according to Christianity. We
okay.
have our own being according to Christianity. Most of Christianity believes we have our own choices of what we do and are not under control. What would give that deity dominion enough to remove that autonomy, remove that from the equation?
Where do you get your autonomy from?
Actually, that would be humans because we got our free will based on the actions of Adam and Eve.
Okay, so where did humans get the ability to have that free will?
By consuming the fruit, the knowledge of good and evil allows us to make our own mind up.
Yeah, so they had to have free will before consuming the fruit, right?
No, because they had no knowledge of good and evil before consuming the fruit. They were just
So
following
how
instruction.
did they choose against God if they didn't have free will?
They didn't choose against God. They simply followed the instruction given by the snake. They were just obedient.
Right.
They would
I
not
don't.
have had the ability to know that what the snake was saying was wrong because they had no knowledge of good and evil. All they knew
So
is
so
one
so
being
you
said
you gotta
X and then
read.
another being said Y, so I just followed both when I was told to do them.
So now we're jumping into another subject. So you got to read the context, right? So the
No, I'm just
context says,
answering your. I'm just answering your question.
right. So you got to read the context. The context says you'll know good and evil,
I
right? So
have.
do you have any interest in having a conversation, Matthew, or do you just want to dialogue towards me?
All I said is I have read the context. You said I
Okay.
need to read context. I assured you I have.
Okay. So what's the context?
The context is a creation narrative of people. It's not even a factual story.
Back
It's
kitty.
it's a lesson to be learned, same as any other parable.
That's
And
not a.
this lesson is to be obedient to God and not be pulled away from God. That's the lesson
That's
being
not a
told.
context. That's what can pull from a
But with
context.
but within the story, the beings that we're talking about had no knowledge of what was right and wrong. They would not have known going against God was wrong. They just would have known that God said, don't do, and Snake said, do it. That's all they would have known. They wouldn't know
You
which one's
said doo
right,
doo.
which one's wrong. So all they did is when God said, don't do it, they didn't do it. And then when Snake said, do this, they did it. That's all that happened. They wouldn't have known that was the wrong thing to do. After
Again,
consuming the
I'm still
fruit,
waiting for the
then
context.
they knew what was wrong. Then they were ashamed.
I'm still waiting for the context.
I already gave you the context. The
What
context
you
is
gave
gave a
me is
pretty
you gave
long
me your
narrative there.
interpretation
Okay,
of.
can
the
I can
context
I do
was
a timeout
not
and take
disobeying
over
God.
here?
I'm more than happy to talk to you because him's talking like to a brick wall.
Okay, well that's just rude. But I have to go soon. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
that thing that was up here, John, you said you condemn that, right?
Sorry. Hold on. You for a sec. Can you repeat that?
That thing that was up here before, you said you condemn that, correct?
Now I'm delayed. Yeah. So Numbers 31. I condemn it. Yes,
Why?
because what Moses did was a sin.
Okay. Why is it a sin?
Because it's the harming of an innocent.
So do you think it's objectively wrong?
Do I think it's objectively wrong to harm an innocent as a creation? Yes.
Okay. What if God told them to do that?
Then it would have been good.
See, this is what subjective morality looks like. You said it's objectively
No.
wrong to harm an innocent unless God says to harm an innocent.
So let me give an example here. Can I go outside and arrest somebody?
Can you? Anybody
Can I go
can do
outside and arrest
anything. You can
somebody?
walk up to a baby and shoot it in the head. You can do that.
Right.
What gives
So
you the right to do
you know
that?
what I mean. That's a semantic argument. So you know what I mean by when I say that. Can I go see somebody do
Police
something?
I
enforcing
mean, you're
laws
not the
is semantic.
police, so I don't
It
know
is
what you mean.
subjective.
Do you have the authority to do it, or are you physically capable of doing it?
Would it
Should you
would it
do
be
it? I actually don't know
morally
what you mean.
wrong? Would it be morally wrong for me to take somebody that I seen doing a crime outside, put handcuffs on them, and lock them in my basement for 10 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Can
the
a
laws
judge
enforced by our government are subjective.
can a judge do that? Is it morally
Can a
wrong for a
judge
judge?
tell me to do that, or can a judge order that a person be thrown in prison for a crime?
Is it morally wrong for a judge to have somebody locked away for 10 years?
It would depend on the crime.
Well, okay, man, have a conversation. Like, you know what I mean.
My
Do,
answer
do
is yes, but it depends on the crime. Also, I don't see how this is like relevant to you and like just some random person doing this, because we have like a legal code. Like we live in a republic with a set of rules where like this just gets into like a political philosophical discussion on Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan, and if the state has a monopoly on violence, then you have better like whatever. So anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, anyways, the point is that there are those that have authority and those that do not have authority. So, when the one who does have authority, they're in the means and the right to do so, and the ones who do not have authority, they are not in their means and the right to do so.
So it's not
So
objectively wrong to harm an innocent.
So, God would not harm an innocent.
You
So, it is objectively
except
wrong to harm an innocent.
except that when I asked you why is this wrong, that's the reason you gave. But now all of a sudden, if God tells somebody to do it, magically they're not being harmed. See, this is deeply inconsistent.
Yeah, you're actually right there. What I'd said was
Okay.
inconsistent, and I'll concede that because
Okay.
I misspoke when I said earlier, because in my mind I was still thinking about killing, and then I remember Numbers 31 was talking about the act of essay. If God commanded that, it would be wrong. God would not command it.
you do understand
Then
that
he's bound by morality.
that Moses gave that instruction based off of command by God, right?
God commanded that he go and kill everybody, and then when he went and killed
And
everybody,
how to do it.
yeah,
The
and
full
then
instruction came from God.
I really don't want to talk to Matthew anymore. Can I
Moses was
talk to
just the
you?
messenger.
I have been on this live for over an hour and a half. I actually do like literally have to go, but I don't know. We could pick it up some other time probably. I usually do the science stuff, so if you want to talk about science sometime, that'd be fine with me.
Yeah, you'd school me on the science. I'm not even going to deny that. I already believe in evolution and all that too. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think the Kalam is like a really terrible argument, so it'd be interesting to talk about that sometime, I guess. But
I would love to.
um,
Next time you're up, I can hop up. We can have that conversation. And Matthew, I'm sure you're a great guy. You just don't allow me to speak, so I prefer not to with you.
I just match energy is all I do.